Welcome. I'm going to say from the outset that my facts are not in dispute, and at least I can say that. The PSOW, that's the Ombudsman, upheld all my complaints and held that there were serious failings and breaches of human rights, amongst other things. Of course, that doesn't minimise the pain and sorrow, and that Brian had a terrible death, and that people suffered. Well, I suffered, he suffered. I'm turning first, as my first point, to the false allegations that were specifically to me and also generally. False allegations are an incredibly dangerous, malicious weapon to use against someone. It affects somebody emotionally, job-wise as well, and the consequences can be devastating. In my case, they certainly were devastating. On the 25th of September 2017, I walked onto the ward quite innocently to see Brian, who'd been in hospital a week. He was admitted on the 18th of September. He looked depressed, and he said that the doctor who had been on the ward the year before and had written him off and had prescribed the end-of-life drugs was now in charge. She'd suddenly appeared, and she'd said to him that morning when she walked on the ward that she never thought she'd see him again. I was pretty stunned at that. Within 5 minutes, a nurse came up and said, "The doctor will see you now." I never knew I was seeing a doctor. I'd come to see Brian and to spend my visiting time with him. I was ushered into the office, which was a small room the size of a bathroom. It was quite sticky in there as well. I was met by 4 people. This doctor, Martha Scott, Nicola Marsh, the ward sister, and a man, surnamed Trezise, and another woman with long hair, who I don't know the name of. I stood up the whole time. They were sitting down. There was no room for me to sit. I was just immediately accused of being the cause of Brian's low sodium. He had been admitted with low sodium and a chest infection. And I was accused of giving him or telling him to take extra frusemide, which is a diuretic, when it had, so they said, been stopped months ago, and that I knew this. They said, "You've got to go." I was absolutely gobsmacked. It was like a punch below the belt. I felt winded. Firstly, let me get things straight. It was not unprescribed. It was prescribed. Here are the prescriptions. Everyone has seen the prescriptions, all the investigators. So where did this come from? Why wasn't it checked out? You can't do things like this, so my solicitor said, but it was done. And secondly, why would I give him medication? It was in the notes that he took his own medication. He was in full charge of his faculties. He had been asked that morning in the notes, it says, and he said, "Well, I take my own medication. Celia doesn't give me medication." Where did it all come from, and how did it start? What was the purpose of all this? The man Trezise was vile. Out of nowhere he said, "You need to be contained." Of course, you contain a virus or a wild animal. He has since denied saying this, but he said it, and this man is now in charge of bereavement care. Due to this false allegation of the frusemide, I was allowed to visit 1 hour twice a week. So I had to go. I wasn't allowed to stay. I could go an hour the next day on the 26th of September. I think I nearly passed out. I can't remember much more, or even if I said goodbye to Brian, but I know that for sure, having gone through my phone records, that at 5:05 p.m. I was on the phone to the Welsh Assembly Government, to Carwyn Jones, though what good that would have done I don't know. I was both enraged by the false accusations which came out of the blue, but also totally devastated. After all, he'd been in hospital a week, so why not say something straight away? Why wait a week? Why didn't anyone say anything? This is the question that the Ombudsman asked. It didn't make sense to them or to me. And why did they not double check or check that it was prescribed? In fact, the Ombudsman had the medication charts. And the hospital had given the medication, this frusemide, that was unprescribed themselves on Monday, the 18th of September at 6 o'clock in the morning, and again at 10. These medication charts of the hospital are irrefutable. The Ombudsman questions the wisdom and efficacy of all this. I went home, I'm not quite sure how. I knew I was able to see Brian tomorrow at 2 p.m, but I had to leave at 3 with this woman Marsh. The second thing I did was to write an email to Judith Paget, the CEO of the Aneurin Bevan, stating that I was extremely concerned. This is my email. It's dated 25th of September 2017, 17:08. And it states that I have very grave concerns about a situation at the Royal Gwent Hospital, and I feared for his safety. I won't go into the detail of it. I said that I feared for his safety on that ward with those staff. This is contemporaneous evidence. I had a terribly bad feeling about everything. I can't explain it. It was just so bad. Judith Paget never even saw the email until it was way too late. It was acknowledged by her secretary the next morning on the 26th of September. Of course, the Ombudsman investigation uncovered that they breached Brian's human rights and mine, and that they had violated the hospital policy in curtailing visiting. There is a policy that if somebody does something that they're not happy with, you have to verbally warn them. Then if that doesn't work, you give them a written warning. And then if that doesn't work, you have an agreement, a contract. You can't just turn someone out. To get me out of the way, this was the only way they could do it, to trump up a false allegation. But they said it was true, but it wasn't. My solicitor said, with the benefit of hindsight, and my solicitor knows I'm making this statement tonight, that no wonder he had low sodium with a tumour the size of a tennis ball in his gullet, and that remained undiagnosed until an autopsy was insisted on due to the behaviour of the hospital. The doctor was also found to have misled the coroner, as she told him the false accusation against me and said that I had given unprescribed frusemide, which was totally untrue, but missed out their own medication error. This is the saddest thing of all. Brian died 48 hours later, on the 27th of September, due to a shocking mistake by the staff in the hospital. He was given medication in error and they have admitted it. However, they deny it killed him. The 5 R's: the right medication, the right patient, the right dose, the right route, and the right time. This is in the GMC code and the NMC code, all breached. And there has been no note, no datix, nothing written about this medication error. It was almost clawed out of them. Shockingly, due to their accusations, I wasn't with Brian on the 27th when he died, and I was not told until too late, and I never saw him alive again. He was fine on the 27th of September, as fine as he could be. No one knew what was wrong with him until the autopsy. He was walking around the ward, mobile, and asking me to get him out of the hospital as if he feared something. Nobody has been made accountable. My forensic expert has given his report as well as my solicitor. Here is the forensic report and the vital opinion on the medication error, of which there was no note in any book or datex. Here it is, and it's highlighted. I'll read the relevant piece to you. It is plausible that the death would have occurred over the next few weeks or months, but it is not likely, based upon the evidence, to have occurred that day. It is for the coroner to decide whether the death was from natural causes, i.e. aspiration pneumonia, or due to a drug side effect, and further, whether any negligence contributed to the death. The coroner isn't in communication with me and hasn't responded, even though she was sent the Ombudsman's report, which radically changed everything. I mean, there were 2 death certificates as well, which is incredible. I can't forgive these people for the pain and suffering they caused Brian and myself. As I said, these false allegations could have ruined a career. There must be a full criminal investigation. The false allegations were put on the DOLS form. And a DOLS form, that is the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguards form, which I have actually spoken about before, is a legal document which would go to court, the Court of Protection, and so it is a fraud. It is a serious offence, as he was falsely imprisoned because it was done illegally, with all the wrong information, making out he'd got no relatives. And false imprisonment carries a punishment of up to 10 years. It's an indictable offence. This podcast is quite long and I can't cover it all in the time, so I will update you on this. Thank you.